Alright, people. Review of the week time. So, a lot to get into, a lot to talk about. One of the good things actually is that I've seen some news breaking this morning. I'm recording this on a Monday. I was up with my cousins all day yesterday in Milton Keynes, so by the time I got home it was late. So I was like, right, it's a bank holiday weekend, record this Monday morning. And it's good because there's some news that's come out this morning, which, we'll take it with a grain of salt. I'll get into that now in a wee bit. But we obviously got to do a review of the fights that happened over the weekend. Now, the main card that was on, in fact, the only card that was on of any significance anyway this weekend was the DAZN card up in Manchester, headlined by Jack Catterall, Regis Prograis. We'll do it in the order. I didn't get a chance to see Pat McCormick fight. I will talk about Jack Catterall versus Prograis first, and then I'll go into what the situation is with Campbell Hatton. So I watched the Prograis versus Jack Catterall fight. Now, in the build-up to this, there was a lot made about the fact that Sam Jones had a voice note going back probably a couple of years ago now, where he was saying Prograis would beat Jack Catterall. And Prograis obviously kept that. Now, Prograis, when he was in his peak, which was really, I want to say, about 2018 to kind of 2020, thereabouts, really peak Prograis was, even in the Josh Taylor fight as well, you could see a really, really talented fighter there, and he was exceptionally talented. Now, I think it's a combination of age. He's made reference to the fact that maybe he's been at the weight a little bit too long, but I don't know if that's necessarily is. You're 35 years old. I know you could look at Terence Crawford and say, well, he's even older, and look at him, and good point. I think if you were talking about a prime Regis Prograis, he would have won this fight. Now, he did have Jack Catterall down. It was more a balanced thing. In round number 5, Jack Catterall responded in kind, and they were legit knockdowns as well. They were good knockdowns as well of Regis Prograis in round number 9. Workmanlike performance by Jack Catterall. Listen, Jack Catterall is... He's one of those fighters, he really does fall into the who needs him club. Because as much as Eddie Hearn is trying to, Jack Catterall hasn't the style, he hasn't the career. I'm not being bad on Jack Catterall, I've said this several times about him. There are certain fighters that are good. They are very, very good. They're just not exciting in the ring. And that's okay if you've got quite a charismatic personality, if you have that magnetic appeal, if you can just, wow people just at the press conference by your presence. There are people like that. I mean, look at Tyson Fury, for example. How many of his fights have been, dull affairs over the years? But nevertheless, you still have a raft of people wanting to see him fight. And obviously lately, since his legs have gone a lot more solid, he doesn't really have the movement in his legs anymore, his fights are now a lot more entertaining. But you go back to, say, 2013, 2014, 2012, some of those fights were good, but some of them weren't. Some of them were just, you knew what you were going to get. You could see the talent on display with Tyson Fury, certainly, but they weren't exactly, blockbuster events. And this is before Tyson Fury really became popular. You still had people tuning in to watch. Jack Catterall, on the other hand, just doesn't have that charismatic appeal. He just doesn't have it. He has two of the best talkers in boxing, Sam Jones and Eddie Hearn, and they still can't really push him to that next level. In terms of his fighting, I mean, Jack Catterall's a tremendous fighter. I mean, he should have been undisputed 140-pound champion. He now doesn't have a title. He's never been world champion, which is a travesty because I think his skills warrant that. Now, Eddie Hearn is doing his usual thing of trying to sell Jack Catterall as, this amazing, all-conquering fighter without a world title, saying that in his last 3 fights, he's now beaten Prograis, Taylor, and Linares. Jorge Linares was coming off the back of, I think he was coming off the back of a loss. I think he was stopped over in Japan. He'd had several losses at that point. He'd been stopped in the first round earlier, like in 2019, 2020, prior to that. So that was a shot to bits Jorge Linares. Josh Taylor, again, seen better days, completely washed, and I'm going to say the same about Regis Prograis. No disrespect, but you have to take those wins, put them in context. If you were doing it prime for prime, if it was 3 back-to-back wins over all of those guys, excuse me, in their prime, then I'd be saying, that's impressive. But at this point now, no. There is talk of Jack Catterall versus Devin Haney and Teofimo Lopez. Devin Haney is saying the only person who can make the Jack Catterall fight is Turki Al-Sheikh. What? Seems like Devin Haney is absolutely obsessed with getting on some of those Saudi shows. He absolutely is. Now, I know him and Eddie Hearn, I don't know if they're working together still, and I know there was obviously that little bit of friction there with them at the Joshua show, the Joshua Dubois show, where Devin Haney messaged Eddie Hearn at something like 6 a.m. or basically in the middle of the night. Eddie Hearn clearly was never going to see it. And then there was, a little bit of toys out the pram by Devin Haney. I'm sure Eddie Hearn would work with Devin Haney again in an instant. Devin Haney is constantly talking about coming back following on from the Ryan Garcia fight. We just don't know what the situation is there. And interestingly, I'm seeing a lot of people say that if Jack Catterall did fight Devin Haney, they'd make Jack Catterall favourite. It wouldn't be a fight for the casual fan, to say the least. In fact, I think that the fight, if they'd see the problem with that fight, and I can kind of see why Devin Haney is saying the only person who can make that fight is Turki Al-Sheikh, because Devin Haney will want that fight on pay-per-view. It's not a pay-per-view fight. It's not a pay-per-view fight in the States. It's definitely not a pay-per-view fight in the UK. It would absolutely, like if they thought Prograis versus Haney tanked on pay-per-view, this would strange new levels that have never been seen. That's not a good thing. And I think the fight itself, stylistically, I don't think it'd catch fire. I think it would be, I don't want to say it'd be like the O'Hara Davis fight. It wouldn't be that negative, but it wouldn't exactly be pleasing on the eye. I'll put it like that. So maybe Turki is the only one who can do it, but would Devin Haney want that to be in the main event? He'd never do a Riyadh show in the US or in Saudi Arabia or in the UK having that headline. There's just no way. Turki Al-Sheikh is not a stupid man. He knows some of the fights to put on. He'll put them on where he feels they warrant on the card. If you have someone like Devin Haney whose ego is just, all over the place, thinking a fight like that should be headlining, when you could potentially have, a Daniel Dubois, a Boots Ennis, someone like that in a very, very good fight, much better fight, it just doesn't make any sense. So we'll wait and see what happens with Jack Catterall next. I'd be surprised if he doesn't pick up at least a version of a title at some point. I'd be surprised. His talent definitely warrants it. It definitely does. In terms of Campbell Hatton, because I think that's the... before I talk about Campbell Hatton, Reece Bellotti was meant to fight Michael Gomez Jr. Now that fight on paper, that's got fight of the year written all over it. They weighed in. It was seemingly all good, and apparently the doctors, I don't know, were they in the arena or was it the morning of the fight? I don't remember the ins and outs. But apparently they inspected Gomez and found that he had a kidney infection or something like that, which is, like, I've seen fights cancelled, after a weigh-in for, like Povetkin Stavern, Povetkin failed the PED test. I've seen, and they still went ahead and did something. I've seen that happen, but I've never seen it happen where both guys weigh in and, you're talking about the day of the fight and the doctors have inspected, because, again, you've seen some freak actions. I remember Carl Frampton had that where, I forget who he was meant to fight, but didn't his opponent fall or trip in the shower or something like that? I remember that. But I've never seen it on doctor's advice that they've pulled a fight. I don't recall anyway. And that fight would have been epic. That fight would have been brilliant. I hope, given the fact that both guys weighed in, I think there's a rule where if you weigh in, irrespective of what happens, you're still entitled to some payments. I remember hearing about that being a rule. I don't know if that's one in the UK or wherever it is. So I'm hoping, because that's a bit unfair for the likes of Reece Bellotti, going through all that, making weight, nothing he did wrong, for that to get big. And that was the co-main event as well. James Flint versus Campbell Hatton. Let's talk about this. So Campbell Hatton lost to Jimmy Joe Flint, back February or March this year. It's about 6-7 months ago. And he lost that fight comprehensively. He had his moments in there, but it really exposed I say really exposed. I mean, you could see the flaws in Campbell Hatton's game a mile away. I mean, anyone could have seen that. I seen someone comment, and I think I've heard it before, say, you've Roberto hands of stone and you've Campbell Hatton hands of foam. I did. That was a good one. I will. That's a good one. That's a good one. I'll give him that. But Campbell Hatton itself, his style it's not exactly pleasing on the eye. He's only 23 years old, but the physical strength is a big issue. I mean, I know it tends to be the mid to kind of late 20s. In some cases, some people get their man strength very, very young. But Campbell Hatton still looks like a boy. Everything about him, he looks like a boy, he looks like a child in there. And you can see that in terms of his physical strength, because he is just getting, even against some of these journeymen, he's getting ragdolled in there. So his physical strength really needs to be improved. They really need to try and do something about that. Technical ability, everything. I mean, Eddie Hearn gave an interview, and I've seen it on Pro Box TV, where he was saying that he's even said it to Ricky Hatton, that he thought Campbell lost this fight, and he said that he's just not seeing the improvement. And he even said that Campbell Hatton at this point in his career is an area level fighter, and Matchroom, in the nicest way, are not really in the business of promoting area level fighters. So Eddie Hearn really speaking, this is it, it's sink or swim now for Campbell Hatton. And I've always said this, that Eddie Hearn and Ricky Hatton, no disrespect, but Ricky Hatton's never been the sharpest tool in the box. So a lot of this will probably go over Ricky Hatton's head in terms of what you need to be doing in terms of matchmaking, everything, etc., especially when it comes to his son. The best thing Eddie Hearn could do and Campbell Hatton could do is just say, right, this is where we're at. We're at area level. We want to get past that. If Eddie Hearn is willing to still work with Campbell Hatton, that he's still willing to stay in the gym and improve, he needs to go on the small hall show scene. I've said this for a couple of years now. I said this is what he needs to do. He needs to be in there against nondescript opposition on those small hall shows in the York Hall, in the, I think is it the Magna Carta Arena up in Rotterdam, or Rotherham, not Rotterdam. But he needs to be on these small, Brentwood, all those places. He needs to be on those small hall shows. Well, they're not behind closed doors, but you know what I mean. They're basically away from the cameras. If they are being filmed, they're being filmed by, iPhones, and they might end up on YouTube with about 20 views. Sort of way. So he'd be away from the scrutiny. He can learn a little bit, stay in the gym, have these fights, have them regularly. There's small hall shows in the UK every other weekend. So if he's not taking punishment, he could be fighting 2-3 times a month, if Eddie Hearn is willing to just loan him out to some of these small hall promoters. Now, he's probably in a luxury position that he probably would need to flog a few tickets, because a lot of those small hall ones, you have to pay to get on them, you have to sell tickets to recoup your purse. They probably let him fight for free, as in they wouldn't charge him at it, and just to have Campbell Hatton's name on their card, somebody small hall promoter. So there'd be no issue of him having to fork out money. He could be fighting on these shows every other couple of months, every couple of weeks, if they weren't hard enough fights. And I think that would help develop him a lot more. He's away from the cameras. There's not going to be as much scrutiny on him. I think it would help him big time. I think he should be speaking with, is it Uzi as if? His name is the GMB, I think it's the one, GMB or GBM, promoter, about some of his shows that are they're very good shows, but they're more under the radar. Maybe get him out on a few of them. I think all that would help Campbell Hatton no end if he is going to carry on boxing. If he is. Because the talent just isn't there. Now, as I said in my previous video, if he can improve it, where could he get to? Possibly British level. Possibly. And I'm saying that with a big if. Possibly he can get to British level. And even then, that's a stretch. But if he can get to that, I would consider that a result. Because he really, ever since the get-go, he's really just looked out of his depth in there. And, again, I got to critique Ricky Hatton on this. You're looking at Campbell Hatton, you're seeing him not improve, and you're just completely oblivious to all of what's going on. It's almost like Ricky Hatton knows he's not that talented. He needs improvements. But Ricky is just so, how would I even describe it, in his own little world, that he has his own view, his distorted view of what Campbell Hatton is as a fighter, and just wants him to be the big stage, all this. It's not helping him. It's as simple as just, it's not helping him. So I don't understand what the point is. It's not helping him in the slightest. So that was the DAZN card. Let's get into a little bit of boxing news. So this broke from Sky Sports literally in the last hour. It's 9:55 time we're recording this. This broke at 9 a.m. Canelo Alvarez versus Chris Eubank Jr. preliminary talks have now restarted for a potential fight next. Ben Shalom has revealed. Oh, well, if Ben Shalom said it must be true. We've already started small conversations around the Canelo fight. So Ben Shalom sent him an email and he's waiting on a response. I would imagine that's what it is. If he's ever going to fight in the UK, the fight would sell out Wembley Stadium. Ben Shalom, you gotta love it, don't you? Yeah, we sent him an email. He hasn't responded. I think he could do Wembley Stadium. I don't. And Canelo is a big name, but I don't think that fight would be doing Wembley Stadium. So it went from Eubank Conor Ben to now Eubank Canelo again. All the while, Chris Eubank Jr. seems to have no appetite, and this will be at 168. No appetite for fighting the champions at his own weight. So he's going to go now to 168 to fight Canelo Alvarez, take an absolute pasting in that fight, and then that's pretty much it. But I suppose you can laugh your way to the bank. That's a quick turnaround, isn't it? I mean, you have one fight against Sarah Metten. You look alright in it. You talk about Conor Ben, you talk about whatever, and no, let's just go straight into a Canelo fight. Okay. Now that's what Ben Shalom is saying. Listen, as I said, with Ben Shalom, you take what he says with a grain of salt. We've started conversations. That literally could mean you've sent an email to Team Canelo waiting on a response. That's literally what that means. So there's that. Matchroom have announced on December the 14th they will have a Monaco show, their standard traditional Monaco show. Listen, I like the concept, but I've always said the atmosphere in those, and people complain about the atmosphere in the Saudi shows. No. The atmosphere in those Monte Carlo shows is awful. It's just a lot of rich people who are in a casino in Monaco who are watching the fights, and it's just awful. And I've always said this, because if you ever look at those shows in Monaco, it's not just that the atmosphere is bad. The atmosphere, I think, takes away from some of the fights as well, because the fights always, even on paper, they seem like, oh, this could be a good scrap. And they just it's like a gym fight. It really is. They're not the best. They really aren't. So, he's announced the card for Monte Carlo. Beatriz Fiera against Lucia, how do you say that? Bordosa? Don't know who either of them are. Chev Clark versus Leonardo Mascara. Let's see who he is. Let's see who he is when he's at home. Chev Clark is an interesting one. Chev Clark is an interesting cruiserweight. So let's have a look-see. Now, he is getting up there in age. So they do, as I've said this before, they want to get a move on with him. This guy is 15-0. 15-0. His alias is the King from France. He's originally from the Dominican Republic, from the Nior, and he is raised from Rohan in France. Not Rouen, Rohan in France. 15-0, 9 KOs. Any names I recognise? Dylan Bergen. Yeah, I do recognise his name. He's basically a journeyman. But I can't say I recognise any of the other names on it, to be fair. And what was that for? That was for the EBU Silver Cruiserweight title. He won it comprehensively on points. John Frank Mendy, name, I don't know why that name rings a bell, but yeah, it's not really any names on this resume that jump out at you. That doesn't mean he's necessarily a bad fighter, but you know, let's wait and see. So that's who Chev Clark is in there with. What's this for actually? Is there it's for the EBU, so it's for the European Cruiserweight title. Oh, interesting. Yeah, because that would have been vacated by Jack Massey. I wonder, will he then fight Chamberlain? We also have Akhmadaliev versus Ricardo Espino Franco. I would imagine, I'm pretty sure Akhmadaliev is still WBA champion, is he not? No, he wouldn't be, because that'd be a new way. But I'm sure this might be an eliminator. BoxRec don't have it listed, obviously, but I'm sure that'd be an eliminator of some sorts. Akhmadaliev is always fun to watch. And then, arguably the best fight on this show, Gary Cully versus Maxi Hughes. Now, I remember years ago, 2019, 2020, thereabouts, there was a lot of talk of Gary Cully versus Maxi Hughes. This was going to be on one of those IFL MTK shows that were happening back in the day. Didn't happen. Gary Cully, and I forget who he ended up fighting, but Maxi Hughes ended up fighting John O'Carroll, beat him, and that was the start of this run Maxi Hughes went on, which culminated in a loss to, shouldn't have lost it by the way, to Cambosis, and then him getting just put in there with William Zepeda and taking a pasting for 4 rounds. He's going in there with Gary Cully, who himself, Gary Cully had a lot of form going, but lately he's been looking a little bit shaky, to be fair. He had that bad loss against Jose Felix, looked very shaky against Reese Mulder, looked very shaky in that fight, got very lucky in that fight in many ways, and then had a good win last time out, competitive, but a good win against Francesco Patera. Patera's upset some guys like Lewis Ritson in the past, so Gary Cully back on a run of form. I don't want to call this fight a loser stays on, but that's kind of how it will be viewed. I mean, if Maxi Hughes loses, I mean, I would say in the nicest way there really is no coming back from that. But if Gary Cully loses to Maxi Hughes, I mean, he is still quite young, Gary Cully. I think he's about 28, 29. What might happen there? It's an interesting one. What's to say? Javante Tank Davis versus Lamont Roach, which was actually going to be on December the 14th, is now being moved. They were saying there was an issue with the venue or something, so it could actually share the same card with Benavidez versus Dave Morrell. Who would be in the main event? Now, it's a good card, but who would main event it? Surely Tank Davis would insist upon being the main event. Lawrence Okolie has signed a promotional deal with Frank Warren and Queensbury to fight with them moving forward. Yeah, I did a video on that on Friday. So, yeah, it's an interesting one. That's the clean sweep of the main UK promoters Lawrence Okolie's been with now. Eddie Hearn, Ben Shalom, and now Frank Warren. I don't particularly myself understand the move. I mean, it almost seems like Okolie has been out in the wilderness since he lost to Chris Smith, because obviously he fought Rosansky in Poland, and that was with Sky, and it was just like out the Poland and just fine. And it was a good performance, to be fair, but against Rosansky, I mean, you know, his best win is probably Alan Babic. I mean, that doesn't really say much. Okolie going to heavyweight and going to be there with Frank Warren, you know, I think Okolie is going to struggle at heavyweight, and I said that for a while. I think that a cruiserweight, he really got by being bigger than everyone, having punching power and physical strength, and that was really it. There was nothing really sophisticated about what Okolie was doing. You bring him up to heavyweight, where these guys will literally ragdoll him. I mean, he's going to struggle. He is going to struggle big time there. A lot of people are saying that they think that Okolie has literally been brought in as a fight for, we'll say, a Daniel Dubois, maybe a potentially Moses Atelma, a Fabio Wadley, a good name that people know for one of his up and coming heavyweights to just go in there steamroll. Because I think, to be honest with you, I mean, Atelma might be still a little bit too young, but I think, and saying that, he is still very big. He is much bigger than Lawrence Okolie in terms of size and physical strength, even though he's only 19, he doesn't look 19. A Dubois and a Fabio Wadley, I think that Lawrence Okolie would have a horrendous time against both of them. I think that Fabio Wadley is just too physical. He would bully Lawrence Okolie, and Daniel Dubois, don't even get me started on that. I mean, he would absolutely take Lawrence Okolie's head clean off his shoulders. So I get from Frank Warren, maybe that's why he signed him, because I don't envision him looking at Lawrence Okolie and thinking, you're going to shake up the heavyweight division, because I don't think he will. I really don't. Virgil Ortiz versus Boots Ennis, Bam Rodriguez versus Chocolatito Gonzalez are being eyed for a potential fight on February the 22nd as part of Riyadh's season show in Saudi Arabia. Now, this February 22nd show, I've heard rumours about it that this is going to be a big show, you know, like big. Those two fights alone, whew, that's big. And obviously you would imagine you probably have the likes Daniel Dubois defending his title on there. I've heard this is going to be a bit like the Day of Reckoning show, where it's just big fight leading into big fight leading into big fight. If that happens, then I'll be a very happy boy with that. I'll be very happy with that. I think that's most of kind of the news that happened. We obviously had, and I've talked about that at great length already, the press conference for Tyson Fury, Alexander Usyk. We had that on Wednesday. Interesting, isn't it, that we still haven't heard a peep from John Fury. And I already talked about this in the video, but it is strange that we're now less than 2 months away from Fury versus Usyk. We've not heard a peep from John Fury, and he's apparently still in Team Fury, but he wasn't even at the press conference. That's weird. I can't help but feel he's being reined in by someone. I can't, whether it's Team Fury themselves or whether it's maybe Turki Al-Sheikh or whoever it is. Part of me just feels like John Fury, especially with the way he behaved, because you got to bear in mind, John Fury's been at one of these Riyadh season shows before. He was there with Tyson when he fought Ngannou. I think he's been in Saudi before for other things as well. I think Tommy did an exhibition there, and obviously the Jake Paul fight. That wasn't part of, you know, Turki Al-Sheikh's General Entertainment Authority, but it was still in Saudi Arabia. And John Fury behaved as John Fury did, but never quite as tuggish as the Usyk Fury week where he headbutted the guy from Team Usyk. And I'm wondering, was that the straw that broke the camel's back for the Saudis, where they basically just said, listen, this guy, no, if he's going to be part of your team, he can come, he can be in the corner, etc., but he needs to be reined in. We are not having that anymore. That was maybe the straw that, we'll say, broke the camel's back, so to speak. I'm thinking it might have been. Because, and again, to me, it's just strange that we're hearing just absolutely zilch from John Fury. Like, literally nothing. And this is a guy who needs no second invitation to be interviewed. I mean, I'm sure if you just went with a little iPhone and just said, can I have an interview, he would do something. He would call someone out. He loves being in front of the camera. That's John Fury. So it is an interesting one. I'm curious as to know what's going on there. There has to be something. Someone must have said no more interviews or no more something. They have to. Because it's not in John Fury's MO, I don't think, to just be this quiet for this long. It's a real strange one. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed the video, people. Smash the like button if you could. Hit subscribe, of course, as always, if you haven't already. And until next time, people, I will leave it there.